For remember, now we're in the month of December, and we need to be sharing the love that God has given us so that he will know that we love one another. So these are some of the things that we need to start doing now, because Christmas is going to be up on us soon, and everyone is going to be giving gifts and wanting to receive gifts. So why not start now preparing your heart to give love to those that really, really need it? Do you know someone that might need love? If you think about it, 1 Corinthians 13, 4-7 says, love is patient and kind. Love does not envy or boast. It is not arrogant or rude. It does not insist on its own way. It is not irritable or resentful. It does not rejoice at wrongdoing, but rejoice with the truth. Love bears all things, believes all things, hopes all things, endures all things. Love is such a powerful gift that once we give it, then our heart can be in the right place to begin to love our brothers and sisters, even our enemies, beyond their understanding and beyond our capability, because now we are beginning to love with the heart of God. And when we love with the heart of God, all color fades away. The economical disparities just fades away. All the things that separates us fade away. When we receive the love of God and give the love of God, we look not upon our brothers as to looking at the color of their skin or to the amount of money that they have or to how they are dressed or how they look, because we look beyond those things. And when we can see beyond ourselves, then we can begin to see the love of Christ. So remember, this Christmas, there's a way out of your mess, and it's JESUS.
Where can you buy a brand new Nissan with a lifetime warranty? Kingston Pike. Hey, folks, Gerald Anderson with Ted Russell Nissan. You heard it right. Every new Ted Russell Nissan comes with a lifetime warranty, and that's a long, long time. Ted Russell Nissan on Kingston Pike.
Good morning and welcome to AM 1380 WYSH and Ask Your Neighbor. Ask Your Neighbor can also be heard and seen on our website, WYSHradio.com. And if you are in Anderson, Roane, or Morgan County and have Comcast cable, you can watch Ask Your Neighbor on BBB TV Channel 12. Ask Your Neighbor is the program where you call in and do just that. Ask Your Neighbor. Do you have a comment? Do you have a problem? Or do you have a question? Then call in and ask your neighbor. 865-457-1380 or toll free at 877-711-4005. And for those of you that might be listening or watching on the internet, you can email from our website, WYSHradio.com. Just click on the Contact Us button and email your questions. Now sit back and listen as listeners throughout East Tennessee and the entire world answer your questions on Ask Your Neighbor on BBB TV 12 and AM 1380 WYSH.
Good morning, everybody. Here we are. It is a Monday morning. I told you our friend Jerry Shattuck's going to join us. Good morning, Mr. Jerry Shattuck. How are you, buddy?
I'm great, Ron. Thank you.
Oh, it's good to have you up here. Good to see you. I haven't talked to you a lot in a while. We touch base every now and again. But how's everything been going with you?
Been going well. Lucky man, really.
You were traveling last week, weren't you?
Right, went up to Alexandria and visited Andy Shattuck.
That's cool. Everything good with Andy and all your clan?
Yeah, the school where he's athletic director won their third or fourth state football championship Friday night.
That's got to be good. He's got to be happy about that. Well, good. I asked you to come up here. You know, you have, a number of times we've talked about the historical significance, I guess, of Anderson County. Where you go, we've got everything from the Museum of Appalachia right down to splitting the atom. You know, we've got so much stuff here. You've kept up with all of it. I know you did a lot of work for Joe on Aspire to, bring some of that to his park, some of the people that are from around here. I just wanted to kind of get you to talk a little bit about Anderson County and our history, and if you want to talk a little bit about what you did with Joe, just whatever. But I wanted you up here because I think people will enjoy hearing the knowledge that you have about the history of Anderson County.
Well, I appreciate that. I've got knowledge. Some of it's probably incorrect.
Well, a lot of it was lived, wasn't it? Like, I mean, especially the Clinton 12 and a lot of that you went through.
And, the irony of it is people out there, it's amazing how you run into somebody that, is not really that much into history, but they'll know something about a particular subject that's far more than you know.
Yeah.
So, this
pick it up here and there
about history, it spreads throughout the society and what interests people, and they tend to learn more detail about it than I know, and it's fascinating.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
But I've said this time and again, you live someplace and you begin to take everything for granted.
Oh yeah.
And it's amazing about Anderson County. I mean, as I've stated many times before, no county in America our size has had as many events of national and international significance as Anderson County, nor have many counties much larger.
Wow.
I mean, and this goes all the way back to the I don't know where to begin. The Civil War, for instance, there were no battles fought in Anderson County, but one Union soldier wrote in his diary that of all the counties and areas where he's been, the devastation in Anderson County was the worst he'd ever seen. And that was a result primarily of the Cumberland Gap, which was a strategic point for both sides of the Civil War.
Okay.
Because, the Cumberland Gap controlled a vein, a route of supply and transportation. And so it's funny, the Cumberland Gap changed hands 4 times during the Civil War.
Really?
Because each time one of the armies would occupy the gap, they'd become concerned about their supply lines being cut. So when the other army approached, they usually would abandon the gap.
Yeah.
Well, since the Confederacy, every time the Confederate Army marched up there, they went right through Anderson County to get there. And back then, of course, armies lived off the land. They appropriated chickens and hogs and cattle and eggs and everything.
Whatever they needed.
Split rail fences for campfires and whatever they needed. So it was very devastating for Anderson County. In addition to that, we had these quasi-military groups that weren't really official or under any control. And they would go throughout the county and raid and pillage, sort of covering themselves in the mantle of being some sort of Union militia or Confederate militia. And those people helped contribute to the devastation that Anderson County suffered. But then after the war, Anderson County did quite well in Reconstruction because primarily of its Union sympathy during the war. When the war started, when the states voted whether or not to secede from the Union, in the southern states, Tennessee, of course, voted in a referendum to secede from the Union. But in East Tennessee, and particularly here in Anderson County, the referendum vote was 1,278 to stay in the Union and 97 to secede. So there was a lot of Unionist sympathy in Anderson County, and during Reconstruction, their position in the state legislature improved, so they were able to finally get some railroads in here, which they'd been working on very hard prior to the Civil War in order to try to take advantage of the coal
that
was here.
Yeah.
And Anderson County commenced its reign as being the #1 coal producing county in the state of Tennessee in most years.
Wow.
Occasionally they weren't. But that coal was amazing for... Somebody asked me a question, what are the 2 most important things from 1850 to 1950? And this is probably true nationwide, but nobody can answer that question. But my answer is coal and trains.
Okay.
Because the trains brought the coal to the factories. The coal powered the factories produced the product.
Sure.
The trains took the product to the American people. And it was a continuous cycle.
Yes.
And that continued actually up until the 1950s if you think about it a little bit. Because,
absolutely.
You know, coal-fired trains continue to dominate.
Yeah.
Of course, the automobile came along, but up until the 50s, there were most of the freight was handled on railroad.
Transport was done on railroad, yeah.
And, of course, passengers were amazing. The number of passengers that continued to rely on railroads. And they were all coal-powered until the diesel engines finally came in in abundance in the 40s and the 50s. But at any rate, all this coal production was accompanied by timber production. So we had the coal and the timber that led to tremendous commercial activity in Anderson County. That valley up there from Beech Grove to Fraterville to Bryceville, there were more people in that valley than there were in Clinton and Coal Creek or Lake City or Rocky Top, however you want to call it now, put together.
Were they there for timber?
Coal and timber.
Coal and timber.
All those coal mines were up there. And the coal mine led to the first incident of international significance, certainly national significance. That's the Coal Creek War.
Yeah.
And Tennessee back in the late 1800s, well, after the Civil War, and through 1892, had what they call the convict labor system, where the state would lease convicts to these coal mine operators to mine coal. Well, the free miners didn't like that very much because it displaced their jobs. So finally they rebelled, and in Bryceville, they took over the stockade that housed all these convicts at night, and they'd work in the mines during the day, and they loaded those convicts on a train, sent the train to Knoxville. Pretty extreme. Well, the governor sent a militia up here to reinstall those convicts. Well, those free miners armed themselves and dug fortifications to resist the militia and try to maintain the new status quo, which was no convict labor. And the Army approached, and before they had a battle, they decided to have a negotiation. And they negotiated, and the state made certain concessions, so the convict miners were reinstalled. Well, the state did not follow through on the concessions it had made in that negotiation. So the miners rebelled again, took over the stockade, sent the convicts to Knoxville. This time, though, they burned down the stockade. And this rebellion spread down to Oliver Springs, which was also a huge coal center.
Yes, sir.
And it spread all the way down to Tracy City near Chattanooga. So the state had a real problem on its hands.
Yeah.
And the governor sent a militia up here, 500 people, and they're getting ready to have another war, which didn't develop in the first place, and fortunately didn't develop this time. But the state legislature was in a crisis mode.
Yeah.
And so they finally, in 1892, abolished the convict labor system, which was a big issue and received national attention during that period. It even received press coverage in Europe.
Were other states doing that as well?
Yes, other southern states were, and as I understand, even that Pennsylvania and Ohio did it for a while.
Okay.
I could be mistaken about the extent of that. But, you know, that Harper's Bazaar had reporters here. Wow. Harper's Bazaar was the magazine that was equivalent to what you'd call today's Time magazine, I guess.
Sure.
So that was a big significant event in Anderson County history. And, of course, coal continued to be king. Now, that was all on the west side of the county.
Yes, sir.
Interesting there. I'm having to ramble around here.
That's all right.
But when the Indians were, Native Americans, were displaced to Oklahoma, the federal government took over ownership of all those lands that had been occupied as home for the Native Americans. And in the 1830s, they began selling 5,000-acre tracts of this land. And a fella in Oliver Springs by the name of Henry Wiley, who had been mining coal there, he would bring the coal off the mountain with mules and wagons, load the coal on flatboats in the Poplar Creek, float the flatboats down Poplar Creek to the Clinch River, to the Tennessee River, and sell the coal all the way south to Chattanooga and Alabama.
Wow.
But he was big in trying to get railroads in here because he knew about the potential up near the Coal Creek Valley. So he had acquired several of these 5,000-acre tracts. And after the Civil War, we finally got railroads all the way up to Coal Creek and past to Jellicoe. And he opened some mines in Bryceville area.
Mm-hmm.
He immediately got into a lawsuit with some northeastern investor who'd also bought some of these 5,000-acre tracts.
Mm-hmm.
And there are huge disputes over boundary lines, which you can easily imagine.
Well, sure.
The mountainous terrain and surveying probably wasn't as sophisticated as we know it today. But anyway, he ended up in a big lawsuit with this northeastern investor. And rather than waste all their money on lawyers, they got together and formed a Coal Creek Mining and Manufacturing Company.
Oh, wow.
And deeded all their property to that new company. Well, that company owned, therefore, all the land, all that mountain, from Morgan County to Oliver Springs and northeast all the way up to Coal Creek and Caryville.
Wow.
And they still own that mountain.
Coal Creek, yeah. That company's still
under
there.
a different name now.
Windrock, right?
Right.
Yeah.
But was huge. And Anderson County was a big commercial hub. In 1890, they built a brand new courthouse. They're supposed to be the second most beautiful in the state of Tennessee.
What was the first, Nashville?
I don't know, so we don't even talk about that. At any rate, I mean, we were a big commercial giant in East Tennessee at that time.
Yeah.
And in 1905, a group of 6 businessmen decided to go in the textile business that they didn't know a thing in the world about. But they started Magnet Mills.
1905.
And Magnet Mills struggled to start, but they learned their way. They grew and grew. World War I came. They received several huge Army contracts to manufacture socks for the Army. They continued to grow. They had a sales office in the Empire State Building in New York.
Oh, wow.
And all the other textile companies followed them to the Empire State Building. They were one of the leaders.
Wow.
And Magnet Mills stayed the leading hosiery manufacturer up until the 1950s.
Who were the men that started it?
Well, a fellow by the name of Sam Leaf, C.J. Sawyer, W.E. Llewellyn's father was one of the investors, David Young, Judge Young.
Mm-hmm.
It was amazing. And Magnet Mills, by the 1930s, employed 1,100 people.
Right down here.
Right down. Well, and that doesn't sound like that big a number.
That sounds like a...
But when you look at Anderson County, at that time in 1930, the population was 19,000. That's men, women, and children.
Yeah.
You have one place that employs 1,100.
That's a big deal.
That's huge.
Yes, sir.
And it was locally owned and locally operated. And those people were very interested in maintaining control and status quo, obviously. But look what happened to them. During the Depression, they continued to run that mill at a loss. They had inventory stacked to the ceiling because they couldn't sell it during the Depression. But they kept operating because they felt such an obligation to their employees and to the entire community.
Yeah.
You know, this entity that employs 1,100 people out of a total population of 19,000 is huge. And they kept the mill running during the Depression, even though they were losing money doing it. But like I said, you know, obviously...
Did they recover from that, Jerry?
Oh, yeah. They were more successful during World War II in the 1950s as they had ever been before. They finally fell apart in the mid to late 60s, 1960s. But look what happened to these people. You know, these folks, obviously they were in the board of directors at the mill.
Yeah.
The board of directors at the only bank in town.
Yeah.
The deacons at the 2 major churches. City council, county commission.
They were all intertwined.
We're all the same people.
Yeah.
So obviously, and they were good people.
Obviously.
You know, as I indicated by my remarks about the Depression, they were good people, but they wanted status quo. Now stop and think about this a minute. Here's obviously a deep commitment to status quo. They're the largest private industry in the county. You had agriculture here around us, the Clinton, Andersonville, Oak Ridge area. You had the coal and the timber back on the mountain here. And that was the status quo.
Yeah.
And suddenly, here comes TVA. Now, we don't realize it, but in the 1930s, TVA was a tremendously hot topic. You know, in Congress, they debated and had a huge crisis legislatively about TVA because it was considered a socialist encroachment upon the capitalist system. Because here you have the government, tax-funded efforts, building dams to produce hydroelectric power, and obviously the flood control, which saved the valley again and again.
Yes, sir.
But all of a sudden, there's 2,800 people working on that dam up there, Norris Dam. 2,800 people.
Changes a lot for
changes a lot of
county
things.
for 1930.
Working on the dam and clearing the land for the impoundment of Norris Lake. Build a new city, Norris. Build the second paved highway in the county, the freeway from Lake City across the dam to Hall's Crossroads. Was the second paved highway in the county in 1933-34. This new town they built, it's amazing. They had dormitories for 1,700 men. They built homes for 1,100 families. And that was the town of Norris. TVA owned everything in the town, all the homes, all the buildings, all the commercial buildings, all the government infrastructure. Norris School was built, and incidentally, that closed. It was a K through 12 school. Prior to that school, we had Glen Alpine High School and the Andersonville Institute as the high schools. And, of course, they were combined into Norris High School.
I've heard that the president's wife actually came and opened Norris School. Have you heard that?
No, the president came and opened Norris.
Oh, what? Really?
Yeah.
Norris Dam, I knew. I was talking about the school, that she came when they opened the school.
She may have. I know she was in Norris on more than one occasion.
Oh, wow.
But that school, incidentally, trivial fact, when it was built, it was the largest electrically heated building in the world.
Really?
The Norris School. And, of course, those 1,100 homes they built were all electrically heated. All had electric refrigerators.
Wow.
And this was transformative. Here in Anderson County, people were still using coal and wood in fireplaces, kerosene lamps, and so forth. So, I mean, imagine here's, ranges and refrigerators and electric fans. I mean, amazing, social, cultural impact. But our population in 1930, as I mentioned earlier, was 19,000. In 1940, our population was 26,000, primarily related to the construction of Norris Dam. And that's not big numbers from 19,000 to 26,000, but it's a large percentage.
Sure.
And it wasn't just quantitative, it was qualitative too. I mean, these people that came into Norris were engineers and foresters and people of generally a much higher educational background than the locals. So it was a qualitative change also. So here we go from 19,000 in 1930 to 26,000, excuse me, in 1940. In 1943, there were 100,000 people.
The world changed for us, didn't it?
Working on the Manhattan Project down in Oak Ridge.
Yeah.
And, can you imagine that kind of an influx in a society that just 10 years earlier had been very much in a status quo with coal and timber and magnet mills?
No.
And small farms.
We were used to what we were used to.
That's right.
And it changed dramatically.
I mean, dramatically is a good word, but not strong enough, really. And, of course, it was the secret city. I mean, it was the 5th largest city in Tennessee and wasn't even on the map. It was, I think, 59,000 acres, gated, fenced, patrolled by Army personnel as they undertook the Manhattan Project. It's just unbelievable, the magnitude of that project. K-25 was the largest building in the world.
Really? So we had the largest electrically heated building in the world, and then we ended up with the largest actual structure building in the world?
That's correct, yeah.
All in Anderson County.
Right. And, it's all interesting, but imagine the cultural
I can't.
and social impact on a community that, absorbs that much growth.
The closest thing I can think of is when you go to a UT game. You know what I mean? Everybody come all at once. The stores are lined up. Yeah. The roads are busy. You go from 19,000 to well over 100,000.
And I'm going to make a real leap here now.
Okay.
But today, what's happening down in Oak Ridge?
Oh, yeah, with the nuclear.
Oak Ridge could be more important to our future.
Yes, sir.
Than it was to our past, as crucial as it was to our past, because it not only produced the bomb that ended World War II,
yes, sir,
but it kept producing these more sophisticated weapons and delivery systems that actually won the Cold War.
Yes.
Without having a
Star Wars and all. Yeah.
And here we got things happening down in Oak Ridge today that the significance cannot be understated. Can you imagine the potential revolution in energy?
Nuclear energy.
Because you talk about anything, it all starts with energy.
Yes, sir. Everything.
And,
And these little nuclear energy plants, they're small, but they can make just astronomical amounts of energy, can't they?
That's right. And apparently they don't know which way to go yet. You got fission in these small reactors.
Yes.
You got fusion.
Yes.
You got solar that I don't think they're anywhere near harnessing yet, but that's what they're working on. The wind turbines, don't let me talk about the wind turbines because I think they're the most ridiculous things we ever thought up.
Waste of space.
But it's just staggering to think about all of this happening in Anderson County. And here Oak Ridge, they built this new city to house 75,000 people, which it did during World War II.
Yes.
But then, after World War II, it downsizes to 30,000.
Okay.
Now, you remember hearing about Judge Sieber.
I do.
T.L. Sieber.
Yes, sir.
He was mayor of Clinton in the 30s. People, in 1940, he was elected county judge. In 1942, Manhattan Project. 1950, Oak Ridge goes from 75,000 down to 30,000. Can you imagine being county judge
over that
when all that's happening?
No.
And you're the administrative person responsible?
No, sir.
To adjust to it and so forth. That's why after his term as county judge, he was only known as Judge Sieber. That's all anybody knew him as. Just amazing.
Yes.
So, there's no way to understate the local, national, and international impact of Oak Ridge. But, we're just getting started here.
It seems like it.
In 1956, we become the first home of the first public school in the South to desegregate.
Yes.
After the Brown versus Board decision that didn't order the desegregation of schools, but it made possible for federal courts to start ordering those desegregations.
You and I have talked about this before, but I want to talk about it on the air. Clinton didn't get the recognition that they earned by being the first school to desegregate. We got recognition when there was problems, but they always talk about Selma, or they always talk about other places when Clinton was the very first school in the South to desegregate, weren't we?
That's right, and the one that stood fast to maintain the desegregation, despite, a mob that literally invaded this town. We had outside agitators from Washington, D.C. and Alabama who came and were followed by hundreds of sympathizers from throughout the South. And during that very first week, the first day of school, they had registration day the week before school opened.
Sure.
The black students came and registered, no problems. The school was closed for the teachers to have in-service training for a couple of days, and then school was to open. And in the intervening weekend, this guy, John Casper, shows up from Washington, D.C., and tries to organize some demonstrations in resistance. And on the opening day of school, he's only got about 5 or 6 people down there. Most of them are kids carrying signs.
Okay.
And they, like I said 5 or 6. It was more than that, probably 15 or 20.
Okay.
But along with them, we've got almost 100 media here. We're talking New York Times, London Times, Los Angeles Times, Washington Post, the local newspapers, the TV, CBS and NBC TV, ABC also, I think. Clinton 12, the 12 black students walk down the hill and go into school, no problems, no issues. The demonstrators, within about an hour, they're gone.
Yeah.
And that's it. Well, the Sentinel comes out that afternoon. You remember we used to have the Knoxville Journal in the morning and the Sentinel in the afternoon?
Yes, sir.
Well, the Sentinel came out that afternoon, and the headline was, Clinton High integrated without fuss. And that was the truth.
Yes.
But that night on the nightly news, coast to coast, NBC and CBS were
showing 20 kids.
Well, they had a lead story about this demonstration and this resistance in Clinton, Tennessee. Well, the next morning, and these numbers are almost literal, we had about 50 people, and they stayed a little bit longer. The next morning, we had 500 people, and Casper is joined by this fella from Alabama, Asa Carter. Let me digress a second about Asa Carter.
Okay.
He was head of the North Alabama White Citizens Council, and his claim to fame had been earlier in Birmingham, Alabama. He and some of his cronies had rushed the stage and tried to beat up Nat King Cole.
Oh, Lord.
Who was playing for a big audience there in Birmingham.
Yeah.
And singing. He shows up, and if anything, he's a little bit more charismatic than Casper. In the meantime, the Clinton folks are trying to get some help from the federal court in Knoxville, and Judge Taylor, the federal district judge, issues an injunction prohibiting anybody from interfering, which none of them pay any attention to. Casper gets arrested for interfering, is taken to Knoxville the next morning and found guilty, and Judge Taylor sentences him to 1129 in jail. He immediately appeals and makes bond, and is right back over here the next day. So all this development and this more and more publicity all over America.
The media ginned it up.
All over Europe.
Yeah.
It is really ginned up. It's amazing. And don't get me wrong, it's free press. They were doing their job. But as usual, they emphasize the negative.
Sure.
They don't emphasize the fact that most people are not taking a stand. They're not joining that mob. But that mob is so huge now, by the end of the week, it's 2,000 people in that town square. I can remember, I always digress a little side story.
That's all right, please.
But we had a football game that Friday night, and the rumors...
You were captain of the football team at the time.
But the rumors get started that the mob is going to come down to the football field and hold a rally at halftime, burn a cross. And, that rumor sounds ridiculous, but the situation was so volatile that it had some credibility.
Sure.
And the football team, we decided if that happened, we were going to have a little scrimmage at halftime, too. No, that didn't happen, but that gives you an idea of the tension that existed.
Yes.
Now, Friday night, like I said, there's about 2,000 people up there. Saturday, there's even more. And by this time, the local leaders are really in a bind about what to do. So they organize a home guard, just everyday people.
Sure.
Like Ron Meredith, and plant workers, mill workers.
Yeah.
Most of whom are veterans. My football coach. And they're deputized and armed to go out there and try to control that mob. because back then, of course, Main Street Clinton was like every other main street in small-town America. It was the main north-south route.
Yes.
So that mob disrupted traffic and just created chaos. Well, this Home Guard was trying to maintain some semblance of order, and there were only about 40 of them. And that mob could have rushed them and just taken it over immediately. They didn't, and at one point the Home Guard decided to try to clear the courthouse yard. That's the old courthouse back then. It had big greens and trees around it. The mob retreated, and they regrouped and said, let's charge them. Well, they charged the Home Guard. The Home Guard threw tear gas at them.
Oh, wow.
They retreated again, and now they were getting mad. And you can read in the museum some of the comments that were made about rushing the Home Guard and taking their guns away from them and killing them. I mean, unbelievable.
Yeah.
And they were just starting that rush when all of a sudden about 60 highway patrol cars come down across the bridge from Knoxville down Main Street to circle the courthouse.
Wow.
And put the town under martial law. The next morning, the National Guard is here. So we're under martial law for about 3 weeks. But, I mean, that's an amazing thing if you consider it, how close it came to a real tragedy. In the meantime, the Clinton 12, those black kids, what they were going through every morning when they walked down that hill to school, there was mobs on either side of the street throwing things and calling them names and spitting on them, and unbelievable. They didn't know whether they were going to get to school or not.
Sure.
Let alone get home after school. One afternoon, the police went up there and drove them home in police cars.
Wow.
It's just amazing. We had some more trouble in the fall because Casper had been charged by the local authorities with inciting a riot. They brought him back, and he demanded a jury trial for that misdemeanor. Showed up with 3 lawyers. Took a week to try that misdemeanor case, and he was acquitted. And inciting a riot is hard to prove.
Yeah.
So, but national news again.
We're right back in it.
And the mob forms again. It's not as large as it was before, but it's formed, and all of a sudden here we are in the news again. And that's the time when Reverend Turner, the minister at the First Baptist Church, escorted the black students down the hill to school. Mm-hmm. And on his way back to church, got intercepted and beaten up. Wasn't hurt that badly, thank God. He bloody nose and some facial cuts. But he was right there at church the next Sunday morning preaching about the situation.
Yeah.
We finished that year without any more major incidents. Had the next year, nothing happened. Beginning the 3rd year of desegregation, suddenly one Sunday morning, the high school was blown up.
Yes.
And I can remember I was off in college and picked up a paper, and there's a picture of my high school on the front page of the New York Times.
Oh, my.
Laying there in rubble. And I'm sitting there thinking, you know, I'm from there. I know everybody. Everybody knows me, just like in most small communities, right?
Sure.
You know everybody. Everybody knows you. You like everybody. Everybody likes you, more or less.
Yeah.
But, you know, you're proud of your community.
Yes.
You want it to look good.
Yes.
And here we are. We had that mob violence back in 1956. And here in October 1958, your high school was blown up. I'm thinking, boy, what nationwide people must think there's a real bunch of yahoos down there. But again, what happened? Well, Oak Ridge had downsized in population, as I mentioned earlier, on a different subject. And so the Atomic Energy Commission, which had taken over operations in Oak Ridge from the U.S. Army, had an abandoned elementary school. And they offered it to the Anderson County school system to serve as high school. And that school had been abandoned for years, had to be cleaned, painted, furnished, equipped. People turned out from Oak Ridge and Clinton and all over Anderson County with pickup trucks and paintbrushes and mops and tools and lumber and everything to get that school ready to house a 700-student high school. And on the appointed morning, all the county kids were bused into Clinton to their bombed-out high school, and they were joined by the city kids. And they all got on those buses and caravan down to Oak Ridge to their new school. And when they get there, 8 o'clock in the morning, there's the Oak Ridge High School band in full uniform and formation. And they play the Clinton High School alma mater.
That's classy.
As the Clinton kids, black and white, get off the bus going to their new school. Which is classy, because the way we're rivals with Oak Ridge. But, I mean, imagine that.
No, I
Talk
can't.
about something dramatic. I told that story once to a group, and I looked back in the back, and there were 3 ladies there, and they were just
Crying.
I said, well, that's a great speech I must have made.
You did good.
No, I didn't. The story tells itself.
The story does. It's amazing.
It's amazing. But the real amazing thing is, you know how long it took to get those kids back in school?
No.
The school was bombed on a Sunday morning before daylight. Those kids back in school Thursday.
What? Back in Clinton school or back in
back
Oak
in
Ridge?
Oak Ridge school.
So
Thursday. 3
Wow.
days. I mean, imagine that. The logistic accomplishment is unbelievable.
And just the towns and the people coming together.
But when you hear the story, you got the mob violence.
Mm-hmm.
Nothing about the home guard.
Nothing about the band.
Then you have the school being blown up. Nothing about the community's reaction.
Yeah.
Bad things happen, and that's important. But what's really important is how do you react?
Absolutely.
What do you do? And on that level, Clinton did pretty doggone good.
Absolutely.
So anyway, that's that story.
Jerry, did they ever? I know it was rumored still to this day, but did they ever know who bombed the high school?
It's my understanding, of course, it's not just the TBI, but the FBI had agents in here.
Yeah.
Trying to figure out who it was. And I've heard hearsay that they're pretty sure they knew who did it, but they could not get enough proof together to take to a grand jury. So nobody was ever tried for that bombing. Now, there were 3 people that were tried for conspiracy to use explosives, but they couldn't tie it to the bombing of the high school at all.
Wow.
Totally circumstantial and a little bit weaker than circumstantial, really. But one of those 3 did get convicted. But they, there's a lot of rumors. I mentioned earlier about coal. And, of course, with all the coal mining that we'd had for decade after decade after decade, there's a lot of people out there that are very skilled.
With explosives.
When the high school was bombed, it was 3 different synchronized blasts.
Wow.
That destroyed the high school. So there's a lot of suspicion that it's probably somebody experienced it and used the dynamite, of course.
Yes.
But at any rate, that's another story that Anderson County has absorbed and reacted to and contributed to it successfully. So, Coal Creek War, Magnet Mills, Norris Dam, the town of Norris, Oak Ridge, the Manhattan Project, desegregation, the world of the contribution of Oak Ridge to the victory of the Cold War. And, of course, now it's research is just astounding.
The National Lab is just amazing.
Well, now, I just sort of skimmed over the top of a whole bunch of things.
No, it's amazing. I mean, it's very, very interesting. That's exactly what I wanted you to do, to come by, because it would take months and months and months for you to tell everything that you know. I know that you did some of the, I guess, is it biographies of folks for Joe for the Aspire Park?
Yes, Joe was, of course, he thinks very comprehensively.
Oh, yes.
So when he opened that park to be a recreation and inspiration park, he meant it. It is an unbelievable recreation park. I mean, the playgrounds, the bicycle tracks, the bicycle and hiking trails all over that mountain. I mean, 20 miles of those trails. You can't see one. You can't see one of them from the other. They're all
independent.
The trees and so forth. And maybe down the winter you might be able to see it in a place or two. But it's an amazing facility. I'm not a biker at all, but I've talked to a lot of professional bikers who've been on that mountain, and they say it's one of, if not the best in the eastern United States.
Wow.
It's amazing.
Did you write the story of what he called the Great 8 that he's got? Did you write those stories?
I wrote all but one of them.
Okay. What are the Great? I was there, but I can't remember what.
Well, it emphasized the the events that I just ran through.
I thought so.
Norris Dam, Manhattan Project, the Clinton 12, Clinch River Pearls, and I'm going to talk about that later.
Yeah, we'll do that.
Magnet Mills, and Burrville. Now, I didn't write Burrville. Matt Hollingsworth, who is Joe's nephew,
Yes.
wrote the Burrville one. He took a couple ideas from one of my other little bios, but he did a great job. It's really interesting. The Burrville one he wrote, and he helped edit all of them.
Okay.
So I want to give him credit for that.
How did you come about? Did you coordinate the list of the people, or did Joe bring you a group of people, was there anything that you learned that surprised you in the process?
Oh, heaven's sakes, yes. He did not bring me a list.
Okay.
He just says, I want a little bio of notable people, places, and events
Okay.
in Anderson County. I said, oh, yeah, I could do that. Sort of. And he said, okay, let's see what you can come up with. And he wants a little humor in them every now and then. And he wants the word aspire.
Yes, sir.
Incorporated into the text wherever you can fit it in. It is helpful. And I did 2 or 3 for him, and he liked them. And he said, all right, you go. Do whatever you want to do. And this is after he'd already taken samples from some other people from outside.
Yeah.
But at any rate, I started writing them, and I learned a lot in writing them. Part of the problem was signage. I was limited to approximately 250 words.
Oh, wow.
Now, I could fudge a little back or a little up, but, trying to get everything in 250 words is tough. Some of the people that were doing the editing didn't like some of the grammatical techniques I used, because in some, these guys had done so much that you couldn't write it in narrative form. You had to do it by bullets,
Oh, wow.
Let me give you an example.
Please.
You've heard of McAdoo?
Yeah.
There's a McAdoo Street in Clinton,
Sure.
and McAdoo this, and the Green McAdoo Museum, and so forth. Well, the first McAdoo came here in 1790. He was a veteran of the Battle of Kings Mountain, where we defeated the British in the South during the Revolutionary War. And he bought a farm, or bought some land, near the junction of Hines Creek and the Clinch River, started a big farm. He had another son. He fought in the War of 1812. He bought a farm up near just below Norris Dam. He had a son, and we're down to 3rd generation now.
Yes.
Who was an attorney, and he started out teaching school. He hadn't finished college himself. But he organized a regiment to go fight in the Mexican-American War, came back and became president of a railroad company, and something else came in there, intervened in there. He also became a professor at the University of Tennessee in geology, wrote the first geology book on Tennessee.
Wow.
And they were all born and raised here in Anderson County. Now, this last one I just mentioned, the UT professor, he had a son that was not born here and didn't live here. But, all of his uncles and cousins and everybody was still here, so he was in and out of county a lot. William G. McAdoo, Jr.
What?
He was a lawyer, got involved in the transportation business, had a couple of mass transportation projects, first in Chattanooga, then in Knoxville, neither of which succeeded. Ended up in New York City as president of the Manhattan and Hudson Railway Company. They built the first 2 tunnels under the Hudson River.
Oh, wow.
From New Jersey to Manhattan. He became wealthy, of course.
Yes.
Ended up being involved in Woodrow Wilson's campaign for president. And when Woodrow Wilson was elected, Woodrow Wilson appointed him as Secretary of the Treasury. In the meantime, he married Woodrow Wilson's daughter, took over the Secretary of the Treasury. He pushed through Congress the legislation that created the Federal Reserve Board and was the first chairman of the Federal Reserve Board.
And that all grew right out of here.
Yeah, William G. McAdoo Jr. Heck, I haven't even started yet.
No.
Here comes World War I. It started in 1911, I think, right?
Yes.
Or 1914. Anyway, America didn't get involved in that war till 1917 militarily. But when the war broke out, all these European investors rushed to America to cash in their securities and their equities and their stocks and bonds. And back then we were on the gold standard, so they could take that cash, convert it to gold, and take it back to Europe. Well, McAdoo saw this coming as Secretary of the Treasury. He shut down the New York Stock Exchange.
Wow.
So they couldn't do it. And obviously saved us a depression.
Yes.
In the meantime, all the American factories are going full blast, producing weaponry and commodities for the European nations that are involved in World War I.
Yes.
We started out that era as a net debtor nation to Europe. We finished World War II as a net creditor nation to Europe. I mean, that sounds sort of complex, but you know that kind of thing changes.
Turned the tide completely.
Changes the world.
Yes.
I mean, it's amazing. Then during World War I, you remember Woodrow Wilson nationalizes the railroad system?
Yes, sir.
And back then, you know, we had some roads, but we didn't have any highways. The trains took everything.
Yes.
Freight, people, that was it. He puts McAdoo in charge of this. Probably the most powerful man in the nation, you know. Okay, then the war's over. He goes back to practicing law in New York City. He gets together with Mary Pickford, Barrymore Jr., Lionel Barrymore Jr.
Wow.
The comedian.
Chaplin?
Charlie Chaplin.
Yeah.
And D.W. Griffith. And together with them, he starts United Artists, the movie company.
Wow.
I mean, I couldn't do all this in 250 words, I tell you.
No. Wow.
I got two more.
No, yeah, as many as you want.
In 1920, he runs for president.
Really?
Under the Democrat ticket. And, you know, back then, you didn't have, the primaries elected delegates, and the delegates would go to the convention and they'd vote on who's going to be the nominee
Yes.
for the Democrats or Republicans. Well, the Democrats probably didn't have that much chance to win the presidency immediately after World War I. But he went to the convention leading in delegates, but didn't have enough to get elected. And he ended up losing the nomination on the 43rd ballot.
The 43rd.
He goes back in 1924, excuse me. Again goes into the convention leading in delegates, but he loses it on the 103rd ballot. I mean, it's just...
Wow.
In the meantime, he's become a U.S. Senator from California, divorces his wife somewhere in there, Woodrow Wilson's daughter, and marries his nurse. So I didn't put that in the bio.
That wasn't a bullet point, huh?
That wasn't in the bullet. But can you imagine a resume like that?
No, I can't. I had no idea.
I didn't either.
And anybody that drives on McAdoo doesn't have any idea of why.
Well, I'll tell you one guy that does. You know Joey Smith?
Yeah, I know. Yeah, absolutely. Joey does.
He historic Buffett.
I'm going to have him up, too.
You should.
I will.
He's great. But he didn't know all the details about McAdoo Jr., but he knew all the details about the McAdoo family.
Yes.
And one of those details is Green McAdoo.
Okay.
He was born to slaves in the 1850s.
Okay.
Part of the McAdoo family. Thus, he was Green McAdoo.
His name was actually Green McAdoo?
Yeah.
Okay.
And he became a Buffalo soldier after the Civil War and came back to Clinton and became head custodian of that 1890s courthouse that I mentioned earlier.
Yeah.
It was the second
most beautiful in the world.
in the state of Tennessee.
Wow.
And he was a prominent member of the community. And, you know, they named the school after him, Green McAdoo Grammar School, elementary school. And, of course, the museum now is the Green McAdoo Cultural Center.
Wow.
In his honor. So his name is living longer
than Williams.
Than Williams.
And William ran for president twice. That's just amazing, Jerry.
It's,
and that stuff you learned in this process?
In the process of doing, and that's just one. God, I could go on and on and
Go
on.
as long as you won't go. We got all the time you've got.
I even did one on David West.
Yeah, I knew that.
Okay. Yeah.
Tell us a little bit about David.
Well, I'm not good. David can tell all you want about himself.
He does.
And he does a great job. I listen to him here almost every week, and it's great to hear his stories. Golly, Bob.
He's got them.
And that place of his, I mean, it's a mecca.
Oh, it is. It's an icon.
Yeah, it's amazing.
Anybody else that you just was amazed with that pops in your mind?
Well, yeah. Talk about a modern one, okay?
Okay.
Russell Fritz. You ever heard of Russell Fritz?
No, sir, I don't think so.
He was a student in Clinton High School. He was a black kid out of the Norwood area. He was running back on the football team. Wasn't great, but good.
Mm-hmm.
He was point guard on the basketball team, and he was great.
Gotcha.
Clinton High School had a track team back in the 70s. They didn't even have a track. They practiced on the parking lot.
Oh, wow.
They built some homemade high jump pits and broad jump pits, homemade hurdles. They went to the baseball field for the discus and the hammer throw and the shot put practice. Well, that team finished third in the regional tournament. Well, Russell did everything. He broad jumped, he high jumped, he ran the sprints, he ran the hurdles. He was just an all-around athlete, and of course, he scored most of the points for the track team. They finished third in the region. They go to the state tournament and finish fifth.
Okay.
Which is pretty amazing for a school that doesn't even have a track.
Yes.
You know. So after that state meet, his coach says, Russell, listen, they're going to have a decathlon meet in Knoxville, a regional meet, and then there's a state meet. He says, I want you to enter it. And Russell said, well, Coach, I've never done a decathlon. I wouldn't know how to start. And the coach says, yeah, but you're such an athlete, and you've done a lot of those events that are in the decathlon. And he said, well, I've never done a pole vault. And the coach said, that's all right, I've got the Oak Ridge coach. He's going to show you how to pole vault. So he takes him down to Oak Ridge, and in that week, he teaches Russell enough to get over the minimum height required in the pole vault.
Really?
Russell goes to the regional meet. He not only wins it, he sets a new regional record.
Oh, my Lord.
The UT coaches are sitting there with their mouth open. Where's this kid been, you know? He goes to the state meet, not only wins it, but sets a new state record.
Holy cow.
It's amazing. Obviously, he gets a scholarship to the University of Tennessee track and ends up winning the SEC Decathlon Championship during his career. But, I mean, talk about an amazing story. Later on, after graduation, he started working for a trucking company and became an executive.
Wow.
In that trucking company. But that's a pretty amazing story, too. I put that in there with Larry Sievers. We got one on Larry.
Oh, Larry, tremendous. Absolutely.
UT, Charles McRae. Did a little verb on him. And, of course, Atlanta. We got to have Atlanta Sievers
Atlanta
in there.
Sievers.
Director of schools here in Clinton and ended up being
State Education Secretary.
Secretary of Education for the state of Tennessee. Of course, got one on Bones.
Yeah.
It's amazing. During his era as city manager, this is in the late 60s, 70s, into the 80s, he gets $31 million worth of improvements to Clinton. New parks, new schools, new fire departments, new housing, just on and on. $31 million, of which over $20 million comes in the form of grants.
Wow.
That he worked his tail off trying to get. He'd work and be turned down and keep on working, and was so persistent. He got these grants again and again and really did so much for the town.
You know, the Boys and Girls Club every year used to have it was a fundraiser, but they would induct a couple people into, I want to say a Hall of Fame, but that's kind of minimizing it. But they acknowledge these people's huge compliments, and I had the honor of inducting Bones and Ronnie Fox on the same night, and I got I didn't do the research. It was given to me, you know, beforehand to read, and just all of the different things that just on that night that I learned that he had done for the town, and you know what all he did. Even when he left and he started the municipal can't remember what it's called, but basically to fund cities and towns and help them to be able to grow.
Tennessee Municipal Bond Fund.
Thank you, sir.
And he, like you say, that organization loaned billions of dollars
Yes.
to municipalities in Tennessee at extremely competitive interest rates.
Yes.
And they moved headquarters to a skyscraper down in Nashville.
Wow.
And they named that building after him.
Really? I didn't know that. I didn't know there's a building in Nashville named after Bones. I'll tell you a quick Bones story. When I very first got here, probably it was 91 or 92. I'd been here a year or two. And I used to have 3 towers. Part of them were over here on what's now a park, it looks like, was Betty Henderson's land. And there was some things came up, and they wanted me to take those towers down. Well, you can't just take them down. And I didn't know what to do. It was going to be hundreds of thousands of dollars to do what the Federal Communications Commission wanted me to do. And I didn't know, 2-3 years wet behind the ears from Campbell County, been out in Arizona. Yeah. I didn't know anybody. So Bones was our city manager at the time. I believe he was. Yeah. And I called him. And I told him, and he said, "Will you write all that down for me?" And I said, "Yeah." So I wrote everything down I needed, and I took it down there. One day I was sitting out there, and here comes through the door Bones Sievers and Jim Sasser. Bones Sievers and Jim Sasser. And he said, "Senator Sasser, I'd like you to meet Ron Meredith." Ron Meredith is Senator Jim Sasser. I believe he was senator. Yeah. And he said, "Let's go into your office, Ron, and I want you to tell him what your problems are." And he said, "I brought this paper you gave me." Yeah. And we sat down and talked about it. And Senator Sasser said, "I believe I can help you. Will you excuse me a minute?" And I said, "Yeah." And I said, "There." He said, "I'd like to use your phone." So I left my office. They excused me out of my office. But when they came out, they said, "This is what you need to do, and here's what the protocol you're going to have to follow." And I ended up getting what was called a special temporary authority, an emergency authority, so that I ended up having to build a new system. They wanted me to tear the old one down first and then build it, but that would have put me off the air for years. Right. So it allowed me to build the new system while the old system was still intact. So, I was always indebted to him for that because I didn't know who to call or what to do. I was 25, 26 years old and didn't know,
And he helped people like that all the time because he would grab a bull by the horns and get to the issue right quick.
Well, it was, like I said, I don't know where I'd have been if he hadn't. So it was a big thing. Anybody else that stands out that surprised you or anything else?
Of course, I did write one. We did write one on him too. Is Joe Hollingsworth himself?
Oh man, yeah.
It's just unbelievable what he's done for this community.
Please do, if you don't mind, tell a little bit about it because.
Well,
I don't know all there is to know. I'm sure.
Joe started. His father, Joe Hollingsworth Sr., had a hardware store here in Clinton, and he was on the board of directors at the bank, and he built homes himself and was an investor. And here comes Little Joe. That's what everybody knew him as.
Little Joe, yeah.
Still do, Little Joe. And in high school, he built his first house. Wow. And then through college, he was working on building subdivisions. Ends up at the Wharton School of Business in Philadelphia, which is probably the most prestigious business college in America. Continues building houses, starts building apartment complexes, starts the Get and Go chain, starts buying shopping centers and remodeling them and then selling them at a profit. Mm-hmm. He had health centers. His biggest enterprise is these industrial parks that he's built throughout the South.
Yes.
Tennessee, Alabama, Georgia, North and South Carolina, Virginia. He builds industrial parks. He builds buildings to satisfy the customer and has been extremely successful in that. In the meantime, he was the primary donor for the Junior Achievement Center.
Oh, yeah.
Up here near Anderson County High School. Untold people he's helped throughout the years. He takes the Clinton Middle School gymnasium and totally remodels the interior of that that gymnasium, including the lobby and the dressing rooms, as well as the gym floor itself. He builds the
Football
stadium and the indoor football practice field for Clinton High School. And I'm sure it's tragic that he's done that much, if not more, in other areas. But then he comes along with this idea of Aspire, and it is a magnificent undertaking. It's available for free to anyone. If you go there to eat at the restaurant, you're going to pay for your meal and so forth. But all the activities are free.
Yeah.
Which includes, like I said, the playgrounds for the kids, which are just covered up in good weather. All those kids take their little bicycles, and some of them head up to those courses that are up on the hill in the open.
Yeah.
And, of course, the more advanced bicyclists hit the ridges. And those bicycle trails on those ridges are just unbelievable. They've got downhill courses that have a ramp that, the professionals can hit and go 20 feet in the air, The other thing they have, and I still don't understand this, they have these rock trails, and it's just a big pile of rock. I mean, they're not placed in level.
Yeah.
They're lined up. It's just
a pile of rock.
In one area, they have one that looks like it's about 200 yards long. And those bicyclists ride that rock trail. And I don't know how in the world they do it. Some of them have to put the one wheel down and spin the other wheel around to
get down it.
To get over it. No, it's all these are on the level. Some of them are a little bit of a downhill, but it's amazing.
It is amazing.
He's got Revolutionary era figures, Benjamin Franklin, George Washington, carved into trees.
Oh, wow.
Up on the top. And there's a view spot up on the west end of the mountain where you can see out to the Cumberlands, and then you can look west or northwest and see the wind turbines down at Wood Rock.
I've not been on any of the trails. I've been through the general area. They took us on a tour.
And, of course, it's along those trails that the majority of these signs I did are on. And altogether, there's about 60 to 65 of them. And just, like I said, I learned so much about people. Interesting story, too. I don't know.
Yeah,
I'll just jump around.
Please do. We got all the time. As much time as you'll give me, I'll take.
R.G. Krosno. Have you ever heard of him?
No, sir.
All right, R.G. Krosno went to one of the first people in the Norris era, and he was a TVA employee, and it was his job to run their creamery.
Okay.
They built a creamery, and they supplied milk to the people that lived in Norris and to the workers.
My papa worked at the Norris Creamery.
Norris Creamery. You worked there?
My papa did. Yeah.
Really?
Earl Stooksbury. Yeah.
No fooling.
No fooling.
Well, he can tell you a lot more about R.G. Krosno than I can, probably. But see what I mean? Stories, your uncle can tell you so much more. But R.G. Krosno was the head of this creamery. As head of the creamery, his salary was $1,400 a year.
Wow.
Which was big money in the Depression.
Wow. Oh, yeah.
Head of the creamery. That TVA decided to get out of the creamery business. So he sees the opportunity. He leases it from TVA and starts expanding production, and he starts selling milk into Lake City. That's still Coal Creek. It didn't become Lake City until the 40s. The coal mining camps.
Yeah.
By the way, these coal mining camps, one of those mines in New River had 90 homes for its miners, had a huge boarding house, had a club, a cafeteria, excuse me. Anyway, he sold milk to these coal camps.
Sure.
And expands into Clinton and Harriman. And then all of a sudden, Manhattan Project.
Oh, wow.
He starts supplying milk to Oak Ridge.
Oh, my goodness.
And it's an unbelievable challenge because during World War II, getting raw milk and processing it was no easy job.
Yeah.
Let alone getting trucks.
And that many people.
But he struggled through World War II successfully and had expanded, Clinton, Oak Ridge, Anderson County, Harriman. And it grew to a multi-million-dollar business by the end of the It's life.
How did you find out about these people, Jerry? I mean,
there's biographies about them here and there. You pick up articles you see or hear. But Norris was owned by TVA.
Yes, sir.
And TVA auctioned it off. And the people in Norris were in a real bind about what to do because none of them had enough money to
buy the whole city?
Yeah, buy the whole city. And this New York investor bought the whole city and started selling, private homes to their individuals. Well, Crosno went to Nashville several times and was able to get Norris Incorporated. He became the mayor for 7 terms. He was helped by the husband of my 6th grade teacher. His name was Ernie Arnerius. He was the city manager for over 20 years. But he, without a doubt, was the first citizen of Norris.
Wow.
He was also chairman. He served on the Anderson County Board of Education and was chairman of the Board of Education during the desegregation crisis.
Really?
In the mid-50s. So he was really a first citizen of this county. But it's an amazing business story.
Yeah, it is. That's just, like I said, my grandfather worked there. I don't know how long. He ended up leaving and going up north to the steel mills, you know what I mean, at some point. But, yeah, he worked for the North Screamers.
Like we used to say back in the 50s, about 3 R's. Reading, writing, and a road to Detroit.
That's what it was for a long time. That's just amazing, Jerry. Is there anything else that strikes you? Anything else you want to share? Please.
We're talking about reading, writing, and the road to Detroit.
Yes.
Here you get the late 1940s, early 50s,
yes, sir.
And into the mid-50s. And Magna Mills is still going strong in the 50s.
Okay.
But in the 60s, it goes under. Coal production is really declining. Timber production is declining. We have Oak Ridge, which pays great wages. So Anderson County has got a dilemma. We've got the great cash flow with the payroll down in Oak Ridge. But unlike Alcoa in Blount County or Tennessee Eastman in Kingsport,
yes,
they all pay taxes. The federal government in Oak Ridge does not pay local taxes.
Got it.
Now, they pay to water down in lieu of tax payment. But in the 60s, here we got the county's got the cash flow fine with the wages at Oak Ridge. But in terms of local taxes, to finance education, government infrastructure, the functions of government, we got a real problem.
Sure.
So we realize we have to expand our tax base. And some very foresighted people, Mr. Rutherford used to be president of Union People's Bank, Horace Wells, who I rode one on, by the way, they all get together and they come up with the idea of an industrial recruitment agency. So they create what they call the Milton Hill Regional Industrial Development Association. It's a real mouthful. And, of course, they try to recruit industry out of the north. Well, the industry's interested, but when they look at the wage scale that Union Carbide has established down at Oak Ridge, they don't want to come down here and try to compete with that.
Yeah.
So it's slow going. We finally get our first plant in the late 60s, Modine Manufacturing Company.
Yes.
Then soon after that, in the 70s, we had Allied Structural Steel. They built trusses and beams for interstate bridges. Took them in and out of here on barges, by the way.
Yes.
But it's a hard sled. It's hard to go. Well, beginning in the 80s, and I got to give credit to Jim Cooper, who came here as our recruiter.
Yes.
He was very successful, and we started with one industrial park there at Eagle Bend. And when it was not given to us, but it turned over to us by TVA back in the early 60s, we never dreamed we'd fill up Eagle Bend Industrial Park,
Much less need more.
But heaven be known, we fill up Eagle Bend Industrial Park, and we've got to start looking elsewhere. So we end up building 3 other industrial parks.
Yes.
And obviously what it's done to the tax base is indescribable, because they say that for every one manufacturing job, and they debate this, some people say you create 3 other jobs in the ancillary economy.
Yes.
Some people say, no, it's just 8/10 of a job in the ancillary economy. But whatever it is, it's more than that one industrial job.
It adds to the economy.
It adds up to the overall workforce as you have more commercial development, supporting that industrial development.
But those men had the foresight to see that.
We were one of the first communities to have a recruitment agency. So here we are.
Was Mr. Hoskins on that too?
No, Dudley was not involved in it. He was involved in organizing the Chamber of Commerce.
Okay.
Chamber of Commerce, out of which a lot of the men who were involved in this particular activity, and it was funded by the county government and all the municipal governments and Clinton Utilities Board.
Wow.
They would contribute money to fund a salary for the director and the other activities. But we have 4 industrial parks now. I'm not up to date on my numbers, and so take this with a grain of salt, but roughly 40 industries, 7,000 direct jobs.
Jeez.
Which were more jobs than were lost in Anderson County. Oak Ridge downsized in 1989, 1990 after the Cold War ended.
Yes.
And the jobs recreated out here in our industrial parks employed more people than lost employment in Oak Ridge as a result of that.
So we were able to absorb that loss with even more.
Now, and bragging a little bit here now, the New Sentinel used to have a business section on Sunday. I think they have it now on Saturday. They have a chart, the 25 largest law firms, the 25 largest architectural firms, and on and on and on. And one week they had the 25 largest private industries in the Knoxville area. And this is Blount County, Knoxville, Anderson County, Roane County.
Yeah.
Little old Clinton, out of those top 25, little old Clinton had 3 out of the top 5.
3 of the top 5. Wow.
Can you imagine that?
No.
And here we are. The thing I'm also proud of is the fact that not only have we accomplished that, but also Clinton is still a little old town.
Yeah.
It's maintained its character as a small town for families to raise their kids.
Yes.
It's still got the architecture. It's still got the downtown aspect. So I hope we can maintain that too as we grow.
They're getting ready to undertake these projects to revitalize and redo all of Market Street and part of Main Street, very similar to what Cumberland Avenue did, or what they did in Cumberland Avenue in Knoxville. So it's sure to be beautiful.
Well, I'm all for that. I wish they'd keep that diagonal parking, or retreat back to diagonal parking on one side of Market Street. I don't know if you've ever seen a picture.
Oh, yeah, many pictures.
It's amazing. But no, that's going to be a big boon to the county. No doubt about it. But got to maintain a little old town.
Yeah, to be able to do that, to be able to have growth, sustain the growth, absorb the growth and the jobs, and still be able to keep your, maybe a USA personality is a pretty big deal.
At the same time, something like Aspire is something real special also.
Going to draw a lot of people in.
And one thing I didn't mention about this industrial development, the county and the cities have done a great job in supporting that effort. But the real kicker was the completion of I-75 in 1973.
Okay.
Because it puts this crossroads of I-40, the biggest, busiest interstate east and west from North Carolina to California, and I-75 from Windsor, Michigan, down to Florida, puts us, let me think about it, I'm probably going to get this wrong.
Right in the crosshairs.
It puts us within 12 hours of like 70% of the nation's population.
Yes.
And that's crucial.
Yes. For like transportation, and so we're a great hub.
That's right.
For people to come to.
Plus we're the great hub of energy and research. I mean, I don't even have a clue what's going on down at Oak Ridge.
I don't either.
They may already have the answer. I don't know. But whatever the answer is, it's going to be a difficult transition, because somebody's going to lose a ton of money and somebody's going to make a ton of money.
You mean as we move from turbo-generated electricity to nuclear-generated power.
Yeah.
I'd say,
Or from gasoline to batteries.
Yeah.
I keep thinking about getting stuck in a traffic jam with a dead electric battery.
I don't know where you're at, but I'm not a battery kind of car guy. I don't know. Maybe if they made one that sounded like a car, I could adapt a little better. Maybe you're making noise,
I'm just too old school. I'm not big on these electric.
I'm not.
And the autonomous ones, I'm definitely not big on it.
The one driving themselves and all this other stuff. Trace and I got a later model car, and bringing it home, and it moved itself to the center of the lane. If you start to get over it, it'll move you back. It's amazing what all.
Well, I was driving one. My friend of mine had a brand new something or other, and he kept saying this car is jerking. Something's wrong with the steering. We stopped and went to a service station, and first we opened the hood, and there's a big cowling over everything. You can't see a thing in there. I said, well, forget that. And I started driving, and I realized it was that lane change warning.
It moves you.
Come on, give me a break. Who needs that? Well, then the great thing was, I'm going into St. Louis, Missouri, and there's about 4 interstates that all come together at one time, and I'm trying to adjust my mirrors, and the 2 side mirrors come all the way in.
Closed on you.
So here I am trying to merge into these interstates and no side mirrors. That's the best driving I ever did.
You got there and back.
Yeah.
Great. Is there anything else? Like I said, I'll take as much time as you'll give me. I am not on a time limit.
Well, there's plenty else, Ron. I don't know what else to tell you about. I mean, I could go through more of these signs in Aspire, but heck, Fire Joe wants you to come over there and go through them.
When you first told me you did that, I called him. I said, hey, Joe, can I talk about a few of those? He said, well, I'll let you talk about 2 or 3.
That's about it. You got it.
Yeah, and he said, the rest I want people to come out and see.
I may be in trouble already.
No, I don't think so, because I think, if anything, you've encouraged people to get out and see it. You've contributed a lot to our area. I know you served as vice mayor. Did you ever serve as mayor?
No.
I know you were vice mayor. How long were you on council?
I was on council twice, a little over 20 years altogether.
And then how long did you have your law practice?
41, 42 years.
So you've seen a lot come and go. Was head of the football team. You've done a whole lot. I appreciate you. I know a lot. We worked together a lot when you were on council for about 9 years, I guess. For when Wimp was in 8 years. When
12.
That was 12, wasn't it?
12 at first go. Yeah, I was on about 8 before, back in the 70s.
When the retail task force was formed. And we set out to do all,
Yeah. And some of those ideas are still in effect.
They're manifesting today.
Yeah. And I'm really proud of the industrial development. I've been on that board for over 60 years, isn't it?
Yeah.
Really proud of that.
Yes, sir, you should be. Because, again, like you said, the jobs just that we absorbed when Oak Ridge downsized, and it's still growing to this day. I know one thing we're looking. Me and you have had this conversation before. We're still on the prowl for a place for more industrial land and more industrial parks.
Yeah.
I know that at one point in time, people talked about maybe we could work with Campbell County and some other people to do a joint effort or something. But man, those jobs are the lifeblood of our area, aren't they?
Well, they are. There's no question about it. But believe it or not, we're getting a little weak on workforce availability.
Hadn't that kind of always been a problem here? I know that, they bring them to Anderson County, but we recruit out of Oneida and Scott County, Campbell County, because of our workforce. We have a lot of jobs.
Yeah, we have a lot of jobs, and I don't know, we may be Campbell County's largest employer. I don't know.
Probably, because you see a lot of Campbell County cars coming through here.
And that's great.
Yeah. As Joe says, they'll stop at the get and go and get gas and get all the other stuff. So it's a good deal.
Yeah. I don't know. There's just so much history. And, the amazing thing is, I don't matter where you go.
Yeah.
There's some old geezer around that knows some of the local history. And it's always interesting. No matter where you are, there's interesting history.
Well, do me a favor. I mean, you know what you've talked about today, and then over the next course of time, jot down some notes of some other things you like to talk about, because I'd like you to come back. I'd have you every day if you'd come every day and tell us about stuff. But and then maybe
you'd have to whip David first.
Well, every day but Thursday. But and then we'll get you back and talk about any other things that that you recall that you would like to talk, because I think it's important to preserve our history. I want to learn about it. I like to know about it. It's very interesting to me. I mean, I've made a living, raised a family, built a business, all right out of Clinton, Tennessee, out of this little radio station, and the things that people have, I made my living off their backs of what they brought here and did here, and so I'm very interested.
Well, it's amazing what you've done up here, Ron. How many radio stations are there here?
Well, I'm just running 3 out of here. We got 7 frequencies, 4 stations, 7 frequencies, and we're
3 out of here and 4 elsewhere.
Somewhere else. Yeah, well, I've got the Knoxville office over on Chapman Highway, Seymour. So I'm going towards Seymour. I've got that. So we've done all.
Speaking of Seymour, I've got a friend of mine from college. His daughter and son-in-law moved here from California.
Yeah.
Just because they wanted to live in East Tennessee and get out of California.
Well, I found a lot of people doing that.
Yeah.
We've got a lot of people that are coming to the area. That's something that we've talked about a lot, and I'm sure you know we talked about it way back in 2005, 6, 7, 8, 9. Housing. We were talking about that then, and still are today, so they're working on it.
Boy, the housing in Oak Ridge, the growth down there, and the condos and apartments is amazing.
I was talking to some folks building some houses down here, like on the way to my house, and they sold them before they even built them.
Yeah.
The contractor said, "I'm not going to do that anymore," because he said they change everything along the way. But I mean, they just said, "We're going to build this house, and this is how much money it's going to cost." So, I mean, like 4 of them, just bang, 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 because there's such a demand for them right now. So, I don't know how those contractors and stuff are going to meet that demand, but it's out there if somebody steps up and can figure it out.
Well, my sister-in-law passed away a year or so ago, and I've got a great brick rancher available.
If anybody looking for a brick rancher in Clinton.
Yeah, on Douglas Lane.
No, there you go. You just give Jerry a call.
It's a nice home. Well, Sellers Realty has it.
Okay.
So,
call Joey.
Yeah.
Well, good. Jerry, thank you for sharing your time with us, and thank you for sharing that. If you would, seriously, if you just make a note, and I'll holler at you in a few weeks or months or whenever you take a hankering. I would love.
I don't know if I've overstayed my welcome.
No, you haven't. You can stay as long as you want. Like I said, I know the guy that runs the place, and you can stay as long. As long as you want to. As much as you got, as much as you want to share, I'll take. So.
Whatever you wish.
Well,
I'm here to please if I can.
Well, I'll tell you what we'll do then. We'll just, like I said, you think about some other things that you'd like to share, and I'll holler at you, and we'll get you to come back up and do this again on all these different subjects. I'm taping it, and I'm going to tape it and keep it, and so I'll have it. If you want a copy of it, I've got a.
This?
Yeah, and Brad saves the video, so there'll be a video archive of it, and there'll be an audio archive of it.
The video archive is.
That's okay. I tell people.
Call that play off.
People come in all the time. They say, "Oh, I love that I'm on radio." I don't. They'll come in. I wear my sweatpants. I said, "We're on TV too." So.
Well, we got football to get through here.
We do. What do you think? Going to Ohio State. What do you think about the playoffs?
I have mixed feelings. I'm sort of like you. I want to see how it works out this year. I'm a little bit. 12 may be too many teams.
Okay.
But no matter how many you put it, there's going to be a lot of disputed disappointment.
Yes, sir.
Just like, right now, Alabama, those folks are disappointed because SMU is snuck in there. And
yeah,
you can see a little justification for both sides of that issue.
If Ole Miss hadn't lost, we wouldn't be in there.
I know it.
So we kind of snuck in, so.
Well, I just hope that the Vols can put a whole game together.
Boy, if they can.
They're going to be able to. I mean, they've put quarters together or half, but they never have put 4 quarters together yet.
Not against any team of any significance.
It's got to happen. Well, all these powder puffs you play, it just burns me up anyway.
I heard today there's only 3,500 tickets available for volunteer fans.
Really?
That's what they said this morning. They're going to go to donors, season ticket holders and donors first, because Tracy's from Ohio. She's been down here the great majority of her life, but she's from Middletown, same place that the upcoming vice president's from, Middletown, Ohio. And so she said, "Can we go?" I said, "Well, I'd love to go, but tickets will probably cost as much as a used car." So I don't think we can get a ticket.
I heard when Texas and Texas A&M were playing, I think one of them said the tickets were $1,600 a piece.
That doesn't surprise me whatsoever.
And I'm sure the scalpers were getting even more than that.
I can't remember how much I paid, but I went to the SEC championship one year in Atlanta, and it was a lot. It was almost like the ACMs and CMAs have got up to that kind of money, $1,200-$1,500 a ticket. That's why I haven't went. But it was big money, and so I can't afford them playoffs games and all that stuff. But I would love to go see it. I think the Vols are going to be. It's going to be a great game.
I hope so. And let's face it, as I understand, we can't. If we win, we catch Oregon the next game.
Jeez, I don't know about that, because they're lightning in a bottle.
I don't know how good they are, Ron. I really don't, because I don't think Penn State's that good.
Well, that's true too.
And Ohio State lost to them by 1 point.
Yeah.
After making that stupid trip all the way to the West Coast.
That's what we're talking about. It'd be hard on anybody.
And I don't remember the details of that game, but I think Oregon was sort of lucky to win it.
Yeah.
So, and let's face it, it doesn't matter who you have to play. You're going to have to play them sooner or later anyway.
Yeah.
So, boy, starting off with a win over Ohio State and Oregon would be something else.
That would put us well on our way, wouldn't it?
I don't know. I haven't seen a bracket set up yet.
I haven't either.
So I don't know who's in that other bracket.
Well,
it's a big danger. Who would be down there? Georgia.
But Georgia will be in it.
And Texas will be down there.
Yeah, Texas will be in it. That was a tremendous game. Did you see that?
Wasn't that something
That was
else?
a good game.
Wow.
That was a good game. The entire game was a good game. Very evenly matched game. And, the Dogs just came out in overtime. 8 overtimes the week before against Georgia Tech. Georgia was tired. And then come in there and win it in overtime against Texas.
Well, and that quarterback coming off the bench.
Yes.
He gave him a spark. He really
Boy, he did. And I wonder if their starting quarterback, he came back in just to hand the ball off on that last touchdown. But I wonder if he'll be well going into this playoff.
I don't know. He's got 2 weeks, so that's lucky for Georgia.
Yeah. He came in, his arm was dangling. I thought, how in the world's he going to do anything?
I know.
And it stood out because he's got it all tattooed up. So you could tell, man, he was hurt. But we're going to have some good football coming up in the next little bit, Lord willing. I hope so. And I'm going to get you to come back if you're okay with that.
I'm okay.
All right. You just
try not to bore the people too.
You are. I promise you right now, I'll get more calls, texts, and emails about this program than I do a lot of them, because people enjoy.
It's a good program, Ron. It really is.
Well, I enjoy. You know what? I like talking to people. You know that.
Oh no, you don't.
And so I'm well suited for what I do. And I enjoy hearing and learning, especially about our area and about history and about, people's stories. That's one thing in my business. I just love, I want to hear people's stories. I think that they're significant. No matter what the story is, it's the world to whoever's telling it to you, and it happened to. And I like to listen to that.
I'll tell you one other little story.
Tell me as many as you want.
About the modern and the ancient.
Yes.
Remember when TVs first came to Anderson County?
I don't.
The first television in Anderson County was sold at the Upper Windrock coal mining commissary.
Really?
And they got the reception from Atlanta.
Being way up on the mountain.
Yeah, on top of Windrock Mountain.
And so they picked up the Atlanta TV station.
That's it. It didn't have any stations in Knoxville yet.
Do you happen to know the year or around the year? At least the era.
Let me think a minute. Let me think. I got to transpose how old I was in the 7th grade.
You would have been, what, 12?
11 or 12, yeah.
Yeah, wow.
So that's 50, 51.
That's amazing. Amazing stuff. Thank you for coming in with us today. I really do appreciate it.
Well, thank you for having me. I hope it's been interesting to folks.
Oh, it's been extremely interesting.
And like I say, there's folks out there that know more detail about all these stories.
How many books have you put together, Jerry?
Just, well, the stuff at Joe's is not a book. It's, just individual bios, very abbreviated on, like I said, only 250 words. And then I wrote another little book, just a survey of Anderson County history. And in it, I try to stick the story around the events. There's not too many people mentioned as such. There's some mentioned.
More of the events.
But it does give a background of these events that I outlined that have been of significance to not only the county, but the nation, or in some cases internationally. And fill in a lot of extraneous stuff as I go along.
Where, if somebody wanted to get your book, where can they get it?
Well, we're about out. There's still some up at Hammers.
Okay.
And there's still some at Hoskins Drugstore, I think.
Gotcha.
But I'm all out right now, and I don't know whether to print another batch or not.
I listened to a book that Chris Wallace, news guy, is Mike Wallace's son. He wrote a book, and I want to say it was called, I could pull it up on my phone, but I think it was called 1944. I can't remember, but it was going into the Manhattan Project. And he was telling how the president at the time, he was just going through the historical significance and all the stuff happening, and telling these stories about people he intertwined in it. And one of the couples that he highlighted in this book, the man was from Oliver Springs, and the woman was from Norris, and they met at Hoskins. And he talked about them courting at Hoskins and the Ritz Theater, and went all through that. He went off to war. She went to Oak Ridge, where she worked on a machine that she had no idea what it did.
Electromagnetic separation.
Absolutely, but nobody knew. They just went in and did what they told and pushed the buttons and did all the stuff that they were supposed to do. But it told that whole story from their beginnings, meeting on the courthouse square, going to Hoskins, and I just thought that was so cool. If you ever get a chance to read it or listen to it, I think it's 1944. I'll let you know for sure. But
what's the name of the book?
I think it's called 1944. I think that's the name of the book. I can't remember, but I'll find it and for sure. Hang on just a second. Let me pull it up on my on my phone. It's amazing, these things, right? I can't remember what book I read, but I can go ask my phone and it'll tell.
I know, and the more people get addicted to those damn things.
Oh, I know.
Nobody's going to be able to remember anything.
Countdown 1945. That's what it's called. Countdown.
Was that Mike Wallace or Chris Wallace?
Chris.
The son.
Countdown 1945.
Yeah.
If you get a chance to listen to it or read it, whatever you prefer.
It reminds me of a book, Columbus discovered America in 1492.
Yes, sir.
There's a book out called 1491. Have you ever read it?
No, sir.
If you get a chance, get it and read it. It's amazing.
It says the extraordinary story of the atomic bomb and the 116 days that changed the world. He goes 116 days back before we dropped the bomb, and he goes through every single day. The president at the time didn't even know what we were doing, and the head of the atomic energy of the United States, they waited till he got elected, and they waited a little while. I think they said they waited 5 days, maybe a week. And they called and they said, we need to talk to you. And they brought him down a secret elevator, took him to it, and told him about the bomb. But he had ran and become president and didn't have a clue.
Harry Truman didn't even know about it.
Yeah, it was amazing. And like I said, I learned stuff I had no idea. But
the one amazing thing, everybody knows this, but again, they take it for granted and they forget it. They talk about Oak Ridge being the secret city.
Yes, sir.
And of course it was. But there's hundreds of physicists and chemists and engineers down there. They knew what they were working on.
Yes, sir.
And at that point, in 1942, the assumption was worldwide that Germany was way ahead of us on the development of that weapon. So for those folks, it was a life and death effort.
Yes.
Literally a life and death effort. If Germany, got the bomb first and used it,
we were done.
It's over. And it's just amazing how the commitment. You know, there are 3 methods to enrich uranium: the electromagnetic separation, gaseous diffusion, and thermal diffusion.
Yes.
And each method took a separate factory.
Really?
The size of K-12 and Y-12, I mean K-25 and Y-12. And they were not certain which method was the most efficient or the most effective. So they built a factory for all 3. Just to see which one. I mean, that's how desperate the situation was.
Yeah.
I mean, you're talking about, you know, on the edge of a razor there, so to speak.
Absolutely.
It's just...
The things that we've done in Oak Ridge, like you said earlier, changed the world.
Mm-hmm.
Really did. Because, well, where would we be today if we hadn't won that?
Yeah.
You know? Speaking German? Maybe. Maybe. Jerry Shattuck.
What other nation in the world's history has ever repaired, revitalized its former enemy?
Yeah, really. We go in after and
clean up,
reclamate everything.
I mean, Germany's economy and Japan's economy were back on their feet, within 5 years?
Something like that.
I mean, and a lot of that was due to
our efforts.
Our help.
Yeah.
And then we have some people thinking we should be ashamed of America.
Shame on them.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, this is a fantastic country, and it always has been, and you know, good Lord's help, it always will be. So, again, I want you to come back. I want you to come in. I really enjoy hearing from you, the stories and just the history that we've had. I mean, I was talking to somebody the other day, and you go from the Museum of Appalachia and our past all the way down to we're creating nuclear energy, 25 miles down the road. And therein lies huge things.
And let me mention something else. You got the Coal Miners Museum.
Yes.
In Lake City, Rocky Top, whatever.
Yeah.
Museum of Appalachia, Green McAdoo Museum. Oak Ridge, Oak Ridge Museum of Science and Energy, the Oak Ridge Museum. The Children's Museum down there in Oak Ridge is a fantastic place. It really is. And the Oliver Springs Historical Society has a museum that's fascinating. So anybody that's interested, check out those those places.
Yeah, I have to tell you, I've been to some of them. I've certainly not been to all of them. But I should go. Everybody, you get an opportunity. It's good to know what's going on and has gone on in your backyard, right? All right, Jerry. Thank you very much. And like I said, I want you to come back. I'll call you, or we'll set up a time. We'll do something, figure it out, and then you can just think of some things. Because I know you'll get down the road and say, I wish I'd have talked about that, or I wish I'd have thought about that, or I'll think of, I wish I'd have asked Jerry about that.
Well, you better get on there and sell some stuff here. They've had enough of me.
We sell enough stuff. It'll be all right. No, people are good to us, Jerry. They like to listen as much as I do. So they're good to us. They put up with us. Somebody said the other day that it was groundbreaking. Joe Rogan on these podcasts letting people talk for 3 and 4 hours. I said, I was doing that before there was a Joe Rogan. I'll let people come in here and talk 2-3 hours anytime they want to. So I don't know if we pioneered that type of format or not, but I'm happy we do it. All right, I'm going to cut you loose and we'll come back. Folks, you guys enjoy your day. I will have Jerry back, and if you see him out and about, let him know you appreciate him coming in.
Thank you for listening to AM 1380 WYSH and Ask Your Neighbor. Make sure you tune in at 10 a.m. each day, Monday through Friday, right here on AM 1380 WYSH and BBB TV 12, or listen live on